Hello, aloha from Hawaii. My name is Lama Tashi Dundrup. I'm a teacher in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and we follow to the Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, and we apply this to all beings. And when we do this, we apply it from the heart, with all the proper methods of our teachers and the lineage, and altruistically pray that all beings be free of suffering, be happy, and establish in a state of bliss and equanimity, and that this lasting happiness never goes away. I'm going to state the motivation, which is unique in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, that these healing methods and transmissions are applied altruistically to not only all humans, but also to the animal world and the spirit world, which we call sentient beings. So I'll read that, and then I'll chant once in Tibetan and once in American. In order to attain enlightenment for ourselves and limitless sentient beings, our mothers, we now all together take refuge and, when possible, offer prostrations. Palden Lama Dampa Namla Chapsu Chiyo Yedam Chokor Gilatso Namla Chapsu Chiyo Sanjay Chom Dende Namla Chapsu Chiyo Dampe Chur Namla Chapsu Chiyo Paupe Gendum Namla Chapsu Chiyo Pawo Kandro Chokyung Sume Sho Yesheki Shendang Dempa Namla Chapsu Chiyo. And that is, we go for refuge to all the lamas, we go for refuge to all the yidams or the deities gathered in our mandala practices. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, those who have conquered the mind and gone beyond. We go for refuge to all this supreme Dharma. We go for refuge to all the noble Sangha, and we go for refuge to all the Dakas and Dakinis, who are the protectors and defenders of the Dharma. All of these 6 refuges have the eye of transcending awareness. And then the prayer of the Bodhisattva to practice 6 disciplines as the basis for this practice is called Bodhicitta. Sanjay Chodang Choki Chodnam La Jang Chu Bardu Dagni Chapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Jipe Sonam Ki Drola Penjur Sanjay Drupar Sho. And this translated is, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and this supreme refuge, we go for refuge until enlightenment. May I, through merit gained from practicing the 6 disciplines of the Bodhisattva path, accomplish Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So this becomes the basis and the format and actually the energy of these methods that we are introducing. And all practice in this tradition are started with these 2 prayers, usually said 3 times, and sometimes offered with prostrations, which is a special practice of the refuge. Understanding that, the method of this is simply healing. All of these methods are healing, not religion. Healing means body, speech, and mind to become mature and healthy, and that's what we call the accomplishment. When we enter into the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is unique because of its motivation, and also unique because all teachers have teachers and a lineage that they follow and train by, and is a guide, constant guide. When we move into this field of healing using these methods, we want to, first of all, energize the physical form so that it can do these practices with the ability that's required, mental and physical ability. And the basis of this in Tibetan Buddhism, the transmission that we follow, is the 5 elements are very, very important, and they're actually treated as female energies, or what we call female Buddha sources of energy. So these 5 elements are transmitted to 2 purposes. One, to create a good energy, healthy program with psychic energy in the body, and 2, to directly connect to an intrinsic state of awareness that all human beings possess, but very few connect to. So that's the purpose and result together. So when we use these 5 elements, introduced to the West actually, it actually is a very, very old tradition of the race, of the human race, used by all the cultures, all of the various worldly cultures, what we call shamanistically, which shaman means healer. So men and women both use these practices, but the transmission being so old, we trace it back to China with the Kuan Yin tradition or Taoist tradition, and then into Tibet, into 3 areas. And when it entered in Tibet, it became what is called the Bon Po tradition. And it was very, very accepted, very, very, very powerful. It produced incredible results. But for us in the West, because of our industrial age situation, we need to have these practices because of the disconnect from the source of healing, which is nature itself. And so this reestablishes that very useful, necessary connection. So when we do this, we use symbols. Now the symbols of the 5 elements are unique in Tibetan Buddhism because they are based on the energy of these elements that produce healing. So for instance, I have these 5 little symbols in front of me: earth, water, fire, air, and space. So the earth, water, fire, air, and space symbols are incorporated into the body in various ways, some through meditation practice, some through what we call direct transmission, and some through various healing modalities. You mentioned sexuality. Well, that's a modality, of course, and as we can see, it requires healing methods. Then these 5 coded colors we transmit to the energy of the inherent state of awareness. Now, awareness is not something that you're going to discover or develop. All human beings have awareness. They are connecting with their body, speech, and mind to the outer world, what they sense, see, smell, hear, taste, and touch, and what they think. But when it comes to the thinking, both of these are distorted because of the way we think. So we use these symbols to straighten out the thinking process, which is a very simple idea, that you just redirect your awareness from all these distractions that are causing the distortion into an inherent state in your mind of clarity. And when that develops, then the Lama comes into the picture to help with that and to show how to practically use that. So that sums up how useful the 5 elements are, and in this unique tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, to discover your own true nature as being not only very powerful but useful. And the end result, we just simply say, is called realization. You realize who you really are and what to do with that. I'd like to go back to this 5 elements, 5 states of awareness. In Tibetan tradition, since Shakyamuni Buddha 2,600 years ago, all of this transmission came down for 3 categories of humans, and was passed in India to the monks and nuns and to lay people and to what are called specially gifted humans, yogis and yoginis. And this transmission, when it came to developed, it presented the Dharma, which is what we're talking about here, it presented it in two ways, through the Sutra and Tantra practices. Now the Sutra and Tantra practices are the same but different. The Sutra practices, which involve many kinds of deity yogas and making many kinds of offerings and ritual and so forth, are usually introduced by the Lama with a text, a practice text called a puja. In the Tantric tradition, that's not as necessary because Sutra is about overcoming the difficulties of our emotional preoccupation and the dramas that they produce. In the Tantric tradition, we actually take these same energies, I'm talking about the emotions and the dramas, as part of the practice, which means the symbol, the deity, in the Sutra tradition is about overcoming. In the Tantra tradition, it's about becoming. And the result is that one is faster than the other. Sutra gets it done so you have realization of your true nature and how to use it, but Tantra is faster. Once the realization is gained, then you kind of know that both of these are just simply mind training, or what they call realization programs. Just like we put software into our computer to get a result. So the deities are actually energy programs that cause one to heal using the imagination and the ability to focus, which is what we call meditation and yoga. And there are various levels and categories of these yoga practices. But when one starts to actually practice, the transformation is immediate, okay? And for each of us, because we have karma, the result comes on sometimes a little slower for some than others. But understanding this, that the Sutra and Tantra is the only way that these healing methods have been presented and are being presented to the West. In Tibetan Buddhism practices, these methods, we know that, especially in the West, people have short attention span and also memory problems. But that can be overcome with practice by simple techniques of allowing the practitioner to learn to focus and gradually increase this ability to focus for longer periods of time. What is also necessary, because of this industrial age we've been caught up with and all of its distractions and difficulties, is that we need to use our imagination. Now that also has greatly atrophied because of all of our technological electronic stimulus. All of these, I call them toys, but they actually are distractions and cause you to less and less use your imaginary power, which each human has their own ability in that category. But these practices using these symbols, for instance, I mentioned the 5 element symbols, and I also mentioned the Sutra and Tantra symbols. We take refuge in these symbols because they very quickly bring the imaginary process and the power of the imagination back into the individual. And that produces very healthy results. And the Lama and whatever practice is being presented are the same. So when you say I take refuge in the Lama and all the Lama's symbols, which are these deity yogas, Sutra and Tantra, and protector deities, they're inseparable. But they are, if the transmission is given by a teacher, it's because that man or woman is doing those practices. So there's no dogma here. This is a direct result of that teacher's practice. And that transmission comes through in a very powerful way. And the recipient understands this as they do the practice, and if they have difficulties, well, they've got a backup. They've got the teacher, see? Or they've got the lineage of teachers, because they all have the same basis of not just the altruistic motivation, but this compassion basis of Buddhism is not just altruistic, it's impartially applied. Nobody left out. No animal, no human, no spirit. And if we talk about love, loving kindness, which is also the basis of these practices, when we use the word love, we're talking about unconditional love. Not the kind of romantic love that sells products and so forth, but unconditional love in relationships and how we interact with our environment. Then because of those two, with practice, the mind moves into a state of clarity which is actually quite blissful. Well, blissful is synonymous with clarity and voidness. Now, voidness doesn't mean nothing. Voidness means the energy of the universe as who you are. There's a harmonious relationship there. Then finally we come to the fourth, which is called equanimity. Everything being equal, we level the playing field, and there's no high or low. So with these four, unconditional love, loving kindness, I like to use it that way, which in Hawaii we call aloha. I'm wearing an aloha shirt here. Aloha, you're extending this kindness as a cultural, but in this case as a practice. Then the impartially applied compassion, no animal, human, or spirit left out. Then the bliss with the clarity and the voidness of the nature of everything, discovered with the practice, causes one to become what we call one taste in Tibetan, in a state of equanimity. And so we throw arrogance and inferiority out. Just those don't work. There's no such thing as what we call a supernatural anything, being or aspect. And of course, and in that way, there's no inferior. So we treat animals, humans, and spirits, life sentient beings, equally. And that is unique in this Tibetan tradition. Very unique. The end result can happen for a practitioner of becoming a mature human being in one lifetime. But there's no end to lifetimes. Consciousness doesn't end with the body quitting. And so because of that, and because of previous lives that we've been doing these so-called shamanistic practices or healing modalities, it'll carry on into our future. And in that way, the practitioner's future karmically looks very good. So no fear, no worry, throw those away, they don't work anyway. And focus to the present. You know, past is gone, future hasn't happened. This is where we are. So in these practices, that's stressed. So that eventually you move into a smaller and smaller increments of time and actually start to experience timelessness, which is the nature of the universe. There's no beginning, middle, or end to our so-called universe. And because the mind is now involved with all of the ways the universe operates, there's no difficulty. That doesn't mean the drama field is going to disappear. But individually and sometimes collectively, everything gets nicer, healthier. I like the word because I'm kind of like a child, more fun. And so that's it. Okay, so now we want to be a little more specific about the application of the Sutra and Tantra tradition using the 5 elements. First of all, connecting to the 5 elements, the way we start the practice is use the body, speech, and mind as receiving the transmission through what we call tantric sound, vibratory sound, which actually originates from this innate clarity state of mind. And all of the transmission is given in Tibetan Buddhism with these 3 sounds, Om, Ah, and Hum. But what do? Is they establish this in 2 ways, one in your body and one in your consciousness. So the Om is to establish it in the vibrations of the body's functioning. The Ah is to produce an energy program in the body that every exhale is more powerful, which is how we make sound, how we chant mantra, for instance, and speak. And the Hong is the actual transmission of clarity we call Mahamudra or Dzogchen in Tibetan, where that is the mind of the Lama and the lineage actually into the, like a software into a computer, into the consciousness of the receiving practitioner. So Om Ah Hung starts off with the breathing. Then we condense all of this into an energy particle and move with that into the 5 elements healing. Now you've got a situation of 5 elements healing that's not only unique, but has a tremendous backing, because all the power and energy of this practice is like around the planet. There's thousands and thousands of people doing this, and there's many, many teachers. So when we do this, it doesn't matter which element we connect to for healing, all the elements are interconnected. They can't be separate. So if I say, well, I'm breathing, well, you're breathing the element air. So you focus on the air, then you give it a color code. We give it green. And in some cases, we go to the Tantra level and give it a sound. But once you start to do this, connect to the 5 elements in this way, then we bring in the imagination in a meditation program that is again unique, applying it not only to our body, to ourselves, but also to our universal situation as we are in this part of this universe. And that's our neighborhood, our planet, our solar system, our galaxy, and boundless space. This requires not only focus, but the use of the imagination, which in the individual heals physically, mentally, emotionally, which is most important, and because it's shamanistic, spiritually. And spiritually is not a religion. Spiritual is based on the idea that there is such a thing as spirits, which there are, and that their energy is also integrated into us. Everything is integrated into us. So we use that. And the end result of the practice is the establishment of this first being located to the heart chakra, which helps us to get out of this chatter, chatter, chatter of the head chakra and arrive at least into a space of calm abiding. We say peace, peace. And then use that as a springboard or a halfway point to move into how to connect to the clarity, to the quantum aspect of our consciousness, which can produce whatever we want. See, it's kind of like a wish-fulfilling gem, we call that. So that kind of energy program has been established for a long time, and now we're using it in the West under all these extreme conditions of high dramas and all these distractions and the weather program not going along how we think. We say global warming and all of this stuff. So very necessary. But when we come down to it, what we really accomplish is this connection to our inner states of awareness and how to use them. And we put them in 5 categories, matching the color code of the 5 elements. And we use this for the judgmental mind's healing. Judgmental mind is our emotionality. And that habit is very, very unhealthy. Emotionality. So what we want to do is take the energy of the emotions and transform them into practical states of awareness. And when I use the word practical, I mean it can be practically applied to one's lifestyle. Just where and what they are already. It doesn't matter the culture, and doesn't matter the location. So that sums up how these are not only unique, but using focus and the imagination bring accomplishment fast, directly. And that's what we want. To sum all of this up, using the medicine Buddha symbol, Buddha is not a god. We don't worship anything. We don't have supreme beings. That's another fictitious aspect of what consciousness. But we do produce this symbol as a state of maturity. And in Tibetan Buddhism, this one symbol used for healing any modality, including sexual, is all-pervasive. So when I say all-pervasive, it means no center, no boundary, no limit. And anything that we do in Tibetan Buddhism, in practice, comes under this symbol. And it simply means a state of maturity for a man or woman, human being. It's a male symbol, but there's female symbols as well. So I like to make that clear because people think Buddhism religion, and it's not. But there are Buddhists on the planet that practice Buddhism as a religion. And that's okay, because karma is our main theme, and to believe in karma is absolutely necessary. Karma is simply what you say, think, and do produces a result for your future. Karma is also based on past of what you said, thought, or did. And so this is ongoing. But if you reach the state of clarity in your mind where there's no judgment, then there's no karma. So for some individuals, that's the end game. That's the end of the development of the human condition, actually. But that doesn't mean an end to existence. It just means an end to that frame of mind that was so judgmental and harmful. So understanding that, then you know what the lamas are presenting. And they all present this system. When we make these three sounds, Om, Ah, and Hum, it's not just a mantra. It's a transmission of energy that is already available. And it locks into the individual chanting those three sounds in such a way that it brings the body, speech, and mind into the same place, which is a big problem with the human race today. The body's doing one thing, the speech is doing another, and the thinking process something else. They call it multitasking, which is counterproductive. You want to be able to be in what you are, what you're doing, there, with all three in union. That state of union is very powerful. And that state of union is one of the aspects of this symbol of the medicine Buddha. And I have a Buddha behind me. This Buddha statue is that symbol of union. And we actually apply this, just to give you an example, to the worst of all human afflictions, which is anger or aversion. And what we are doing is we're taking the energy of that very destructive way of thinking and being and redirecting it into something that produces, for instance, occasions for powerful spiritual practice. Knowing that you're in a state of union with everybody and everything is very profound. And that connects you to your true nature. That's it. There's nothing beyond this. That's it. Lama Rinchen, my teacher in Honolulu, he says that a lot. That's it. This word, shamanism, shaman has been around since human beings originated. And all the clans of the planet have survived because of this idea of connecting to nature shamanistically. Tibetan Buddhism is actually defined as shamanistic Lamaism, because the Lama is the source of the shamanistic healing methods and is a shaman. But the word shaman, rightly spoken, should be Sha woman, because in tradition and all the cultures of the planet, the women, because they're in charge of the birth process, bringing us humans into existence, had a factor of their consciousness called intuitiveness. And usually the woman had that predominantly over the men, because the men are more preoccupied with the survival aspects and so forth. But shamanism in Tibetan Buddhism is unique because when it is defined as a tradition, you're defining all of Tibetan Buddhism, as it's been for thousands of years, not only in Tibet and Mongolia and all the Himalayan tribes all the way from Afghanistan to Bhutan, but also on the Tibetan border of China and what is now called Russia. And so this is very necessary to understand that, yes, other people are shamans, but what is their motivation? Yes, they have healing abilities, but what is their training? What can they focus? Can they imagine? Do they have a lineage? Do they have a teacher? So forth. Do they have we call it a support system? So yes, they can produce these results, but we are not just reproducing these results on the physical and mental level, we're producing these results on the spiritual level, where one becomes a truly realized, very developed, mature human being, not just a bigger, more inflated, egocentric individual, which is the nature of 7 billion humans. So we're all in this in the same way, but some of us can reproduce with these so-called shamanistic methods a big change in our worldly situation, in the way humans think and with our interaction with our environment. And that's absolutely necessary. So yes, shamanism is about changing the way we think and healing our environment. Stop this overproduction of toxins and waste and damage that's going on with the so-called industrial age. Now, one more thing about shamanism. When it's presented, you have to understand, worldliness is Tibetans called samsara. The word samsara simply means emotional preoccupation with self and everybody else. The other aspect is nirvana. Now, nirvana in other traditions like Hinduism and so forth, that's a state of peace or rest. And those two, one is harmful on the aspect of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual disruption, sickness, disease, and so forth. The other one is clearing from that. Now, even in Buddhism, some people only want to get to this state of peace away from this drama field for themselves. But understanding that this state of nirvana, one must also be using that state of rest as a compassionate interaction with others so that they can become clear of emotionality and peaceful, but at the same time more loving, more kind, and more useful to more and more people in their environment. So that's the difference between what we say shamanistic Lamaism, which is really funny, and any other form of shamanism. And there are many, many forms. And they work. But I'd like to add, when it comes to religion, religion isn't shamanism. Religion is a belief structure based on dogmatic principles. And because of that, it has good qualities, but at the same time, it creates an idea of separation. This idea of separation is exactly the opposite of this symbol of unity. And so understanding what causes separation and what causes togetherness, one must introduce that into their consciousness. Okay? And more think about all of these various so-called religions and New Age, this and that, and using psychoactive substances, and even sexuality. Sexuality in the tantric tradition is for healing. Yeah? Pleasure, of course. But physical well-being and a better relationship with yourself and the opposite sex. Of course, we're not the only ones that use so-called healing sexually practices, commonly now called Tantra. But Tantra in Tibetan Buddhism means the interwoving of the consciousness with the natural world. That's Tantra. So the natural world is viewed as the female principle, and the inner methods of development, connecting and playing with that, is the male aspect. But these two are life force, and you cannot separate the male and female aspects of life force, because if you do, you cause disruptions, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And in sexual tantra, you again have to be able to focus and use your imagination. And you must have the guide of somebody that's proficient in producing a good spiritual result, some development towards it's a new agey term, self-realization. That's kind of an oxymoron, because there's no such thing as a self or soul in our way of approaching this. But this realization is that you are a shaman, that you're a healer. And that's what you want to be. You want to heal yourself, you want to heal others, you want to heal the environment. So that being the purpose, then the ego starts to lose its hold, this idea of a self or soul. And when you lose that idea completely, you're a Buddha. Well, this is just a term for mature human being, because there's no judgmental mind there anymore. But you still look the same, eat everything same, man or woman. So, but you have insight, you have compassion, you have loving kindness, and you have power. And those four together completely define a mature human being. And we say Bodhisattva. Somebody on the way to being those qualities, acquiring those qualities, using those qualities. And so we use a term that all beings become this. We say, Om Mani Padme Hum. That's a way of saying, may all beings become mature and happy and free of pain and suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Tara Tutari Ture Soha. That's the deity, that's the goddess of the five elements that we use for practice. The method is the Om Mani Padme Hum. May all beings be happy using these methods. So, and that's these two symbols on either side of the Buddha here in our Dharma Center. This is where it starts in Sutra and Tantra. So, Duchi Che. Aloha, thank you very much. Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum.